Hello, and welcome to this webinar from CSU Writes on where will your writing time go this semester. This is our first webinar for 2026 and the spring semester, and it's good to have you here. We're going to talk about some approaches to prioritizing writing in your schedule and ways that you might be able to think more than anything else about how writing will transpire in advance of you doing it, right? Planning it out. We'll think about defining and placing writing and what writing is itself within a realistic context and kind of a holistic context for you and your lived reality and life that you have at CSU. We'll talk a little bit about strategies for building momentum on writing projects using calendaring and thinking in particular about if you have multiple writing projects going on, and some CSU Writes resources for support. And if you'd been here at the webinar, or maybe you did attend, but there was some opportunity for conversation at the end for some crowdsourced knowledge on what people are using and doing for their scheduling. So let's talk about some approaches and ways that we might think about our scheduling to create something that is realistic and sustainable through this semester. It helps for us to think about writing really broadly as a product, something that is genre specific and that we may already be quite familiar writing in that genre, or that product might be something new that we are challenged by figuring out, like, what is it? How do we write this particular piece of writing? And you can think about it as a process, the ways that those documents get arranged and put together. So that's the craft of writing. So what comes first, what comes next, and how can we make it flow and be fluid or just readable and engaging for our audience? Think about writing as a practice, how we habitually come to sit down or stand and do our work in writing. Or maybe we don't have a habit yet. And so that's something that we want to be building out. And so that could totally be one of your writing goals, by the way, this semester. It could also be your project. So if we think about where writing fits in research and academic scholarly work, it fits across all of the spectrum, from anywhere from kind of concept development and thinking about the kind of brainstorming your topics and challenges of what the problem is that you're going to be solving, all the way through to publications or submissions for funding or wherever it is that you're sending your work out to. And then persona. Writing is also us in relation to others, not just co-authors and collaborators if we're on teams or working with others, but it's also us in relation to our writing community. So sometimes if we're thinking about who we are in relation to the folks whose work we're in conversation with, the other researchers, maybe we've met them, maybe we see them at conferences, it's part of our relationship with them. Our conversation continues on the page, but it may be that you have legacy mentors, or there are kind of ancestors of the field, so to speak, that come and bear on how it is that you're thinking about the work that you're doing in relation to their own or kind of earlier work. And it's also your persona on the page, thinking about how you're crafting who you are in relation to others. And at any one of these places, writing can become challenging for us through a semester. So it's helpful for us to think about writing really, really broadly. And these categories, I think, help us pinpoint where it is that we might be facing some challenges if we find that our writing has kind of gone awry, or we haven't touched base with a project for a while that we've been wanting to make some progress on for the semester. Some of the guiding metaphors that I think are really helpful for approaching scheduling and planning out writing is thinking about kind of a journey through the semester that you are setting out on. So flight works really well. We're going to talk about course corrections, navigation, and thinking about like what it is that you're designing as your flight plan, so to speak, and which direction you're going. And then thinking about something called Einstein time, which I'll share with you, which I think is just really helpful for when we're trying to prioritize writing. And we often maybe in a habitual way of thinking about time as being something that is scarce and unavailable to us. And so then where do we find time to write, right? So that's why we're going to talk about that. We can think about setting a writing goal, and it could be for you that you have many goals, and we'll talk about like how you can list those out and get a big picture of where it is that you're going for this semester. But it's like setting a travel destination. You're in the present, but you're looking towards something in the future. And that something in the future is helpful for you to remember that it's going to be done not just in one sitting or one go. More than likely, it's going to take many iterations and repetitive sessions of working routinely to be able to create that document. which means there's a lot of opportunity for course correction. I love Gay Hendricks, who's was a psychologist, actually at Boulder for a while at Stanford. And in his work on the Big Leap, he talks about course correction and how, as we set our kind of goals and where it is that we want to be, that it's much like starting off in LA and trying to, fly cross country, and that we, put in our coordinates, but that ultimately the plane spends more time off course and being corrected by the autopilot than it spends on course. And I think that's really helpful for us as we're approaching scheduling out our writing in flexible and kind ways, and just remembering that we don't need to be too rigid in what we're planning out now. There can be some build in some flexibility, because chances are we're going to have to course correct along the way. Routine scheduling really helps with that. It gives us a daily and weekly kind of way for us to figure out where we are in relation to reaching our destination and our goals. And of course, regular writing makes our lives so much easier. That kind of brief, frequent, low stress, and highly rewarding practice. Again, another kind of travel or navigation metaphor from Star Trek. For those of you who are Next Generation fans, you kind of know that at some point they would set a course towards a planet, right, that they needed to get to, or someplace else, and then they would make it so, or they would engage. I love both of those terms, right? Make it so or engage, for thinking about scheduling at the beginning of an adventure. So that's your semester in writing as an adventure, thinking about it early. Daily scheduling, super helpful. It gives you the kind of, what can we make so for the day? If you spend 10, 20 minutes at the most, kind of thinking about what you're working on, that could be all of your tasks, by the way. And we'll talk about writing projects as being one of the things that we know where you're going to be spending time working this semester. So it shouldn't be the only thing that you're working on. But as you're thinking about your daily schedule and estimating kind of like what time it's going to take for those tasks, all tasks, include writing within that, and you're much more apt to be able to make regular progress. Then thinking about weekly scheduling, thinking about Sundays or Fridays, it may be that you want to pick up both, perhaps. Say, these were the goals that I set on Sunday, and I knew that I wanted to work on all of these through, and then maybe Friday or Saturday, take another look. You can kind of figure out what your weeks look like. But I highly encourage you to build in regular scheduling in order to course correct, so that you can identify, where's your time going? Is it going to the things that you see as being meaningful and where you want your time to be going? And if not, what corrections can you make? What changes can you make to that schedule? Some common saboteurs of our designated writing sessions. You can think about like why we need to course correct. Oftentimes we get off course, and it's not necessarily due to choices that we've made seemingly overtly. They seem to have just happened, right? If you've ever gotten to the end of a day or a week and been like, wait, how much writing did I get done? Or I planned on writing today, and somehow it's 10 o'clock at night and I still haven't done it. So let's think about like what some of those saboteurs could be. Emergencies, they happen, hopefully not many for you this semester, but there may be work or family or other things that kind of sideswipe and build into your writing time. It may be that you have estimated how long it's going to take to do some tasks, writing tasks, and you thought you would have 2 days on a particular section, and now you're on day 5 and you still haven't completed that section. That happens. Sometimes it just takes longer for various reasons, and so you might be off course with your time. You may have had some additional duties placed on you that you couldn't say no to, and you thought, well, where do these fit? It's going to have to fit in my writing time, perhaps. There's the ever popular and well-known procrastination, where we avoid our writing sessions. There are some interrupted sessions where people just want to chat, or they come in and they see that your office door is open. It could be family as well. Those can derail your writing sessions. And then there may be any number of other ways that that your designated writing sessions get pulled away from you, and that you aren't actually showing up. One of the great things, again, about daily and weekly and then monthly or semesterly scheduling is that you can then stop and take a look at where you are, the days that you thought that you were going to be showing up. How many did you really show up for? How many hours? Perhaps you want to be tracking that. How many hours were you able to get in of writing? That's really, really helpful for you to then understand where it is that your writing time is going. And it also gives you an opportunity sometimes to course correct within the day. If, for example, you're thinking of avoiding a writing session because it just feels difficult, you can pause for a moment if you're procrastinating and just say, am I procrastinating? Yes, well, maybe I could just show up for 5 minutes. That came up as one of the bits of advice in the earlier sessions, live sessions. One of the essential first steps for prioritizing writing in your schedule is making sure that you have a sense of all of the meaningful projects in your life this semester, and that writing is not the only one that you're focusing on when you're scheduling, but that it is because it's one of perhaps many. We'll talk about how many you want to have in a moment. But if you identify, just kind of put together a list of all the things like projects that are important to you that you want to move forward this semester, that you can list all that come to mind and then combine those that are kind of in the same category to narrow focus. So it's perhaps that you're thinking about like, you'd really love to build out a running routine, but you also then want to be skiing and you want to be, going for some hikes or whatever those things. There are some things that you can kind of see that they fit together, and those might go into the category of building out a fitness routine. And so you can combine those so that you don't have projects that are skiing, biking, well, all those, right? That you can just kind of see what the things are that you want to work on and have as part of your life and see how they kind of all fit together. And a big picture examples like, family or a romantic relationship. If you've just started a romantic relationship, those you want to put some time and effort in getting to know that other person, right? And being genuinely present with them. Some rest and recuperation, always, I think that's an important project, but maybe it's not something that you're really focused on. Maybe you've kind of grokked that and you've got a good sleep schedule. You feel like you've built in enough rest time and so you've got some good boundaries there. So maybe that's not something that you want to build in as a project that you're working on per se, but it might be. Manuscript writing, that's probably there, or just writing. I'm thinking about that project and the process and the practice. You could think about maybe writing, though, you want to have both writing as in the production of a manuscript. Maybe you have deadlines this semester, but you also want to be working on your practice. For example, those may be a couple different things that you want to have as project teaching and other things. Basically, if you think about life projects are the things that are going to take about 5 to 10 hours per week of your focus and your time. If you have 5-ish projects, that's a good week, right? And thinking about where you can devote your time and attention. Make one of those projects your writing project. That way, not all of your projects, right, feel like they're being overwhelmed or taken over by the pressures of having to write. You know that writing is one of the many things that you are focusing on for this semester. It could be coursework, it could be a new grant proposal that requires additional research done in the lab. So maybe research is one of those things. So thinking about like what are your projects and where's that time going to go? And then for your writing projects, if you have multiple per week, then just try to keep it to about 3. Again, thinking about how much can you focus on. If you have designated 6 to 10-ish hours for your writing in a week, then which one's going to be your top priority, your second, and your third, and how much time can you really devote to those projects? Again, being realistic so you can create something that's sustainable. Einstein time, I mentioned this earlier. This comes also from Gay Hendricks' Big Leap. And I really like his approach to thinking about Einstein time. And he sets it in contrast to Newtonian time. He says Newtonian time is always ticking away, and there's like this kind of limited amount, right? That we're hyper focused when we're thinking in kind of Newtonian terms about the scarcity or the lack of time, and that it's ticking away. With Einstein time, he says it becomes much more relative. He says you can spend, an hour with a beloved and it feels like it's like 10 minutes. Time has gone by so quickly. You can spend an hour doing a tedious task, something that you really do not want to, you're, resisting doing, and it might seem like 2 or 3 hours. So this is where you become the source of how it is that you're perceiving time. And that approach makes a difference to how you're perceiving your writing time in particular. So that's how we're focusing on it. But you could be thinking about it in general, excuse me, how it is that you're thinking about time. It's really helpful to think that you are the source rather than having an external pressure, because then you have some control over how it is that you're using your time. If you find that you're continually sabotaging or losing track of your writing sessions because you've given them over, it may be helpful for you to think about where is it that you can have a locus of control of how it is that you're choosing to create time or craft time for your writing, and then prioritizing that and hanging on to it. It's a shift in language. I love Gay Hendricks. He said, you can shift from I don't have enough time to I'm not willing to make the time. That's taking ownership. I fall into this one routinely. I consistently am thinking I don't have in my mind, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time, as if somehow time is just this, there's a finite amount, and that once it's gone, it's gone. And then I don't know exactly sometimes where the whole day is gone, right? And so it's about what you're willing to make time for within that day. If you're thinking in Gay Hendricks Einstein time kind of framework, focusing on being present and being connected to the work that you're doing. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, and creating that kind of meaningful relationship with the project. But that's a state of being fully engaged in that kind of current moment, so that you can be focused rather than rushed. I love the beloved metric. I've already mentioned that already, but he says an hour spent with your beloved feels like a minute. So this is, maybe, and for those of you, I suspect that many of you have this experience where you start working on your project and 2 or 3 hours have gone by and you're like, wow, I cannot believe how quickly that has gone. I think that's where we know that we love the work that we do and the writing that we're putting out. And then eliminating complaints. This is a big one and a good reminder for me. So this is something that I'm working on this year, is I'm going to stop complaining about time constraints and move from being a victim, right, to being someone who creates the time, owns the time, right? I have created this time in order to be here with you right now. You have created the time in order to be here with me right now. So I think it's a really helpful approach for us to think about our writing projects and the projects that add value to our life and work. I just love this photo of Einstein, but just remember, you're creating that time to be able to be present, so that you can contain your projects within time and space. It's really helpful to focus your attention, again, thinking about only 5 projects per semester if you can, like family, recreation, research, writing. This comes to us from Charlie Gilkey, Start Finishing. It's a really smart and helpful approach to thinking about what's realistic in a semester. If you're thinking about your week, 3 writing projects max. I've tried continually to add in 4 and 5, and the most that I ever make it to is 3, and generally I'm at 2. So where can you focus your mind and attention? And then thinking about how can you focus on 2 projects simultaneously in one session? You can't, but you can split some sessions, and we'll talk about time chunking and some different ways of scheduling multiple projects so that you can see maybe you have one session, but it's split for a couple of different projects. All right, so goal setting. This is where you identify your destinations and where you're going for this semester. It's really helpful to think about productivity then as the byproduct of repeated engagements with your project. So you're not going to sit down and produce an entire article in one go. It's going to be multiple sessions over time. And really, productivity is not the goal of every single session. The engagement with your project and the ideas so that you can lay things out for others to be able to connect with the work that you're doing in a meaningful way, then eventually you wind up producing something, right? And that's the product. So focus on engagement rather than productivity. It's really helpful when you're goal setting to think about what do you want to accomplish, how will you accomplish it, and then why do you want to accomplish it. So we have these as goals for all of our writing retreats. And it allows for us to take a broad approach to goal setting and time blocking. So you can describe your writing goals and identify some of those deadlines. Again, thinking broadly, maybe some of your goals in your writing goals in a session, for example, or for a week would have to do with showing up regularly, about time, approaching time in new ways in your week. Thinking about how you're going to show up and perhaps have a ritual. Maybe you like Julie Jensen, want to start every writing session off with making some tea, and it's kind of gradually kind of thinking about your project and easing your way into it. Whatever it is that you're wanting to put down as a goal, it doesn't have to be just product driven. You can think about it pretty broadly. Identifying those regular writing times. We have some calendars that I will show you, and identifying those project steps for at least the next couple weeks in breaking down what do you need to do in order to get that next section out, the next thing that you want to have produced within a couple of weeks. Breaking it down into those project steps, we know this is SMART goals, is really, really helpful. And then stating intentions on what you will do, perhaps tomorrow. You can fill in tomorrow with next week or other things too if you want. Those goal setting intentions on what do you want to achieve, why do you want to achieve it, and how are you going to achieve it? And then having a goal setting intention. We use this at almost every single writing retreat, encouraging folks to identify where's your mind and what are you going to be working on? Why is it important? That connection to the meaning and within the project, and have it be inherent to the project, intrinsic to the project, meaning that it is not because of externals, but from internals for your project on why it's of value. So if you're working on a method section, for example, that method section is not important because your advisor or because you have a deadline coming up. Those are externals on why you would want to achieve it. But the internals to that are that method section really helps you kick off your writing project for you to understand kind of how you be pulling together the rest of maybe writing about in the introduction, what you did. So maybe that's your kind of your way you're into the project. And then how are you going to achieve it? You're going to review some notes. You're going to kind of take a look back and kind of gather some details from, whatever your process is, but you get the sense, right? What are you going to achieve? Why is it important? And then how are you going to do it? And that can fit really neatly into a goal setting intention statement, which is I will, whatever the goal is, complete my methods section by within 2 writing sessions by tomorrow. And the reason is that it will help launch the rest of the project. So what is regular writing for you? And you can think about within the context of the realities of your life, right? You want to make sure that it's engaged ultimately so that you can make meaningful contributions. You want it, sessions to allow for you to be in touch enough so that you're not losing sight of your project, that you have maybe some good notes as well if you have a couple days or a week in between. But if you are just closing your computer or turning it off and then leaving and then dashing away for a couple of weeks, coming back, the re-entry to that project is going to be tough, I think. So just making sure that you're in touch with your project enough for you to keep moving it forward in ways that you find satisfying. That's your goal. A routine so that you can set it and forget it. That's part of building a writing habit and practice so that you just know that you show up at certain times because you've set those. Also having a routine that's flexible enough so that you can accommodate multiple life and career projects. And that means that it's flexible for you to be able to perhaps rearrange things as you need them. Doesn't mean that you're not prioritizing writing. You still are, but that maybe you need to have some flexibility in that you write at different times during the day, depending on what your obligations are for teaching or for, childcare or other things. And that your writing, as mentioned earlier, is contained so that you can experience necessary time away from that writing project. So you can open up your project box when you're writing and you can close it down and then you can feel like, oh, I got my writing done for the day. If it was better than you thought, that's awesome. Usually we feel pretty good or, whoa, that felt great. Or if you're like, oh, if I'm really struggling with this section, still great. You got it done for the day. You can close it up and then it's not that you're carrying it around again. We know from Robert Boyce's work, he was a psychologist who studied stalled and procrastinating faculty, largely research writers, academic writers. And his keys to academic productivity in his book on professors as writers, it focuses largely on 3 different areas that we kind of pull out for CSU Writes and talk about as things for you to do that will boost your productivity. They are not required for you to do in a particular kind of way. You can kind of experiment and kind of see what works for you and logging and tracking your own tasks. We won't talk about that much more here in this session. This session is mostly about scheduling, right? So prioritizing writing in your calendar. But also then if you can have someone hold you accountable for meeting the goals that you set, someone that you check in with, if you're writing and your PI or your faculty advisor is asking you regularly for writing things, you probably have that built in, and that's kind of some external pressure, but you can also have a little bit lighter and gentler external pressures from a writing group or colleagues who you just kind of check in with every once in a while and say, this is the progress I'm making. Um, CSU Writes also, by the way, has a resource called Warp, and I'll try to remember to mention it at the end, but it's writing accountability for research projects. And so that's a check-in. It's currently only for faculty and postdocs. We rarely make exceptions, in part because the offering, we need to keep it contained enough for us to be able to serve all the writers who are participating in a semester. But if you're interested, there's information on the website. Scheduling regularly, we know the benefits of it in part from Robert Boyce's work, how much writers produce when they're writing regularly versus when they're binging. And you can just think about how painful those binges are to produce that little work. So regularity is one of the things that helps you feel better about your work, and then you produce more. Go figure. It does really help for you to clarify, log, and track your work over time, repetition of sessions for some sort of duration, paying attention to your energy levels, being aware of the due dates. We'll talk all about that when we talk about calendaring. And then thinking about your project's content sections and estimating time for each of those sections. Really helpful for you to know when you sit down and schedule out your day, schedule out your week. The tasks, those are really going to determine your course. What do you need to do first? What do you need to do next? And what do you need to do after that? You can keep task lists. I have two. I think they're really, really helpful. This is loosely based on David Allen's Getting Things Done method, where you have kind of a mind kind of dump or kind of mind sweep list. I really like that metaphor, and thinking about just where do you keep all of the things that you need to do that are coming up. For me, I'm often haunted, or I can wake up in the middle of the night like, did I do this? Did I send that email? Did I? And it does help to have a master list where you know, oh, it's on the list and I know when I'm going to be approaching that or getting to that. So you can just add daily list tasks to that list, and it can be a combined list for all of your different projects, all 5 projects. And then you can break down and clarify your tasks into smaller bits and pieces. You pull from that list to your weekly and daily kind of current task lists. So I use another calendaring system, and I just pull from my master list and add in each week. It helps me keep projects mostly on track. I've got so many different types of projects that for me, it's being able to track and keep track of all the details is really important. So you can have a weekly planning session, a daily planning session, as I've mentioned already, and then that closing the loops when you have an open loop and an open task, it really does feel satisfying when you're like, check off the, check it off the box, or check off the box, or cross it out, however it is that you want to note that you have closed that loop. Open loops tend to weigh on us, and so it's helpful if we can close loops and say that task is done and move forward. It becomes a little bit more satisfying each time we incrementally add to our writing project in particular. Making external all the tasks that we kind of hold on internally as needing to be done can be quite messy. And so that's what that mind sweep list is about. Mind sweeping is always in flight, right? You haven't reached your destination yet. So it's an ongoing list of tasks. So it's kind of like never landing. It has multiple destinations, perhaps for multiple projects. It can be unfiltered, meaning that just anything goes that you put on there. It can be unprioritized as well, because you just want to keep it running. And maybe mixed time horizons for these projects. So some of them are due earlier, some of them are due later. You want to kind of figure out how it is that you would keep that list and how you cross things off. But I personally, I just like a hard copy standard sheet of, it's not exactly a legal pad, but it's very close to a legal pad for tracking them. You could take that big list, all of those jumbled projects, and then filter them into your current task list, into your weeks and into your days. Again, thinking about open loops, those undone tasks or projects, they create what David Allen talks about as mental noise, that you're hauling them around. And so if you feel like your writing project in particular is just something that is weighing on you, it may be that you have some open loops that you would feel better having closed. So just something for you to pay attention to. It helps you reduce overall work efficiency if you have open loops. So if you close them, you can increase your overall work efficiency. And then open loops reduce feelings of satisfaction with those projects. This would be something like thinking about taking that big list and to a weekly list, or then I guess the daily should have gone up further. But so you have weeklies, things that you want to be working on, again, include exercise, include what all the things that you want to include in your week, and then your daily one, what's possible within a day. Recommend experimenting with the best way for you to list and track your tasks. A lot of people like project management systems like Asana, particularly if you're working on team projects or with collaborators. Obsidian, if you're doing lots of reading and reviewing and trying to mind map projects and ideas that way. You can think about just note cards and post-it notes, whatever, hard copy, right, old school, whatever is your kind of preference. We're not going to cover those here as scheduling techniques, but really much more about how are you approaching mentally your writing projects, but experiment with systems. And that could be one of your projects this semester for your writing, right? Is thinking about, I want to try out and experiment with a couple of different project management systems that will help keep me on track and see how those work. At each writing session, then thinking about like, what do you want to accomplish? Why is it important? How are you going to do it? What can you accomplish in those maybe 25, 30, 50-minute chunks, however long you've set up aside. We'll talk about that more in a moment. But what would be best to tackle first at the beginning of the session, earlier in the day, perhaps during a high energy time or during a lower energy time? Like, what are the tasks that would be easier for just to do like when you can get to it? Thinking about energy management in particular, it's helpful if you match your writing time to your mental energy levels. This comes from Avatar Zerubbabel's Clockwork Views. A time, B time, and C time. He rates them out. And A time is when you're just mentally like there, you're spot on, you feel, mentally adept. If you can, and if you have a regular time during the day where you just like know that you're brilliant, funnel that towards your writing time. See if you can arrange your schedule so that it works best for your mental energies. I taught for 8 years and was out scheduled during my A time. So my A time couldn't go to my writing at that time, but B time could. B time is mid-level thinking energy, and it's great for reading and editing, according to Zerubbabel. Some of the lower kind of things that don't take as much mental agility. C time, don't pretend to write. Or usually what happens if we're binge writing, we go through all of these cycles, right? A time, B time, C time, and then it's just diminishing returns. So the amount of writing that we can do during 2-hour blocks for 5 days during an A time, that 10 hours of writing is so much better than having 10 hours of writing where you move through A time, B time, C time. The diminishing returns are significant. And then D time comes to us from Carrie Chenault from anthropology. And she's like, we should just add in D time because that's when you're down and out and you just don't even pretend that you're going to write. Think about calendaring. You want to know what your semester is going to look like. So I highly recommend, and we do this in the writing retreats, and we used to do this in person when we held this workshop in person, but you just add your due dates to the calendar. Don't make it too precious, just kind of like what's due when, and then predate them, particularly for articles and proposals and things. Give yourself some leeway, pay attention to any overlapping projects and things that you might have to work through at different times. And then thinking about crossing out any days that you can't write for conference travel. Don't pretend to write on days that you can't. It's just really frustrating. It also means that you're not being terribly realistic with your time. It's best to cordon off time for writing and stick to that, and to not pretend that you're going to be able to write on the plane, because I always think that I'm going to write on the plane and don't. So I now don't make myself write on the plane. And recognize that any remaining days on your calendar are going to be precious for your project. So this would be, let's say, if you're teaching on a Tuesday and a Thursday, where you've got heavy lab work on those days, or meetings, other things that you just know you're not going to be able to be prepared to write. And then Sundays, you want to just hold that as a sacred day, or another day for that you don't want to be writing on a Sunday. So that leaves Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. And you can kind of just play around with that and see what that looks like. For your week, it's really also, it's a similar process. Go through and identify in the hours of your week what is available for your writing project. So, and do you have time to show up? How much time do you have to show up on your weekdays? If you eliminate all of the hours that are not available for your writing project, like what is left? Is your week arranged to prioritize your writing? And then can you rearrange your schedule? Again, thinking about A time, when are you spot on? So that you can make your A time your writing time. So this would be something where this would be like my A time as my writing time. and where I have 3 days set for writing, a couple hours at each session, and then some optional sessions, which are in pink, and then some flickering sessions, which may or may not be available. Let's say I had office hours after my writing session, that it'd be lovely if I could just continue with that writing session perhaps, but it may be that I'll have the knock on the door and students coming in, and so it won't be really available for writing. But what you could count on then is having anywhere between 6 and 8 hours this week for writing. Helpful for you to know that all of the blacked off areas are areas where you have prioritized other projects, your rest, your family life, your taking kids to school, or soccer practice, or whatever the other things are. This way it's a great visual. And we'll send these out and we'll have access to them. And if you need this is a weekly calendar from Wendy Belcher's Write Your Journal article in 12 weeks. And we're happy to send it out to you, but you can also find them online. Just really nice to see like what is really being devoted to your project, and then how heavy that weight is for our writing that we carry it around, particularly if we're avoiding it or not doing it. So we want to see, where can we prioritize it? If you have multiple projects, again, thinking about, you can have 20 projects for the semester of writing, but 3 per week that you're working on. What are your priority projects? And there are different ways that you could schedule out. You could have Mondays and through the week, Monday through Friday, a couple hours for writing each day, with some time, other additional times to touch base with your secondary kind of B project and your tertiary and C project. But you could also have a schedule where Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays are mostly available, like you teach on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and so you don't want to be working much on your primary project, but you have times that you can devote both in the morning and the afternoon. This is great if you're thinking about when deadlines approach, or if you need to shift your schedule a little bit. This is a good model for being able to focus intensively on a single project to meet a deadline or to make good progress on a manuscript. Then again, touching base with your other projects. Not a lot of time is devoted to those, but it's just enough time for those projects not to disappear. Again, thinking about what is enough touch time and being in touch with your project for you to still be engaged with it. So it's not such a heavy lift picking it up again once you come back and it becomes your priority project. This is if you had set times for the week. You could arrange it so that your primary project is your first project, and then your secondary and third project later on. A fragmented schedule. Let's see, Cal Newport talks about this as the journalistic method. You can think about journalists who are like here and there, gathering things, adding in, typing up a little bit here, typing up a little bit there. It's a way to get some writing done. I think if you know already a lot about your subject and you're pretty confident that you know what you're going to be writing at the next session. It's hard to write in half-hour increments and make a lot of progress unless they're stitched together well and you are logging and helping yourself, or kind of what it is that you're going to write at the next session. So just know that fragmented writing can work for some folks. I had a colleague there was a faculty member at Montana State who, that's how she wrote amazing history texts. But I was amazed that she could just dash something off before a meeting and then go to the meeting and then come back and dash off something else. So if it works for you, it works for you, but it's harder to maintain. Ultimately, routine scheduling is essential to writing regularly. So my recommendation is experiment with what works best for you this semester. And the goal, this comes to us from Jolie Jensen, Write No Matter What, where she says, make sure that you have brief, frequent, low stress, and highly rewarding encounters with the project that we enjoy, because that's how academic writing becomes pleasurable. All right, some of the resources from CSU Writes. If you go to the faculty or the grad events, there's the drop downs. And if you're watching this webinar, you've already found us there and found the link. But we will continue to update the special events and some additional things and send out reminders for those later on in the semester. Show up and write. This is a great way for you to build in writing into your calendar. You can sign up to host a session. It starts February 2nd. There are virtual offerings and options and in-person ones as well. It just takes us a couple weeks into the semester to get everything organized behind the scenes to create locations and announce those. to find writers, actually, hosts, writing hosts. So if you'd like to host a session, it's a fabulous way to have about 2 hours of accountability. You can do it, again, virtually on Teams, or you can have an in-person space on campus. And we try to find rooms for whatever time you want and accommodate that. We try not to have too many times that overlap, though. So there's show up and write. There's also sprint and write. Those are sessions that have timing to them. So they're on Tuesdays from 10 to 11:30. They're timed, basically half-hour segments. We start at 10. We have 25 minutes on. We have a 5-minute break, and then we do 25 minutes on and 5-minute break, and 5 minutes on, a 5-minute break. That's the end of the writing session. It's a great way to set up your week. So those are on Tuesdays in the morning. Just a heads up, we have a book club this semester on the AI Con. If you are AI curious or have been concerned about the growth of AI in academia in particular, Amy Bender and Alex Hanna, two professors, two faculty who have a blog that they talk about AI and the AI Con. So they've created a book. So it's worth having a conversation. So please join us on March 3rd or 4th, either in person or virtual, whichever conversation works best for you. And just a reminder to write early, often, and better together. Reach out if you have any questions or needs, and happy writing in spring of 2026.